sports in Sault Ste. Marie, Algoma, and Northern Ontario. We interview the greatest athletes and coaches from your backyard. Broadcasting from the True House Media Studio in Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario, here is your host, Jay Houslander.
We're here today for Around the North Sports Show. I'm your host, Jay Houslander, my co-host, Tony Boniferro. How are you today, Tony?
Oh, great, man. Just got back from a week's vacation, so nice to be back, I guess, in the Sioux. And
But you mentioned you went to Washington.
yeah, I went to Washington, D.C. I took my stepson down to an anime convention in Maryland. So we ended up staying 10 minutes away from Washington, D.C. So first time there, man. We drove down, drove back. I'm a history buff. It was an absolutely unbelievable trip. That area is just beautiful. Washington is just, it's a nicer city than I expected it to be. I heard a lot of trash about it, but it was great.
And not to talk politics, but did you, again, like say January last year, did you guys go to the Capitol where they stormed it?
So I went to the Capitol. I did. Shockingly, like there's tours available. I didn't expect that. Got to go to the crypt. You know, we got to, so absolutely. We got to do a tour of it. It was just like anything else. Like it was just a beautiful city, and everything was open. Everything's free. All those tours were free. The Smithsonian's were free. I just couldn't believe it. So, highly recommended. Especially if
no sporting events.
No, you know what I almost did? I almost went to the XFL game on Sunday night.
Being a football guy,
the DC Defenders were playing. The stadium was less than 10 minutes from where we were staying, but we decided to drive back to Pittsburgh, and then, we spent the night in Pittsburgh, which again is another beautiful city that we just wanted to kind of cut the drive in half. So
very rare for you to miss a sporting event.
I know, it was great, but I was a little upset to miss the city championship. Missed a couple great basketball games, and just excited to get back into the swing of things here for Nassau.
And then as I say, we'll talk about Nassau and city basketballs in a little bit. Getting to basketball right now. Down the line, I hear there was a little bit of not a fiasco, but a little bit of stuff going on. Talk a little bit about what you heard.
Yeah, so I'm not going to get into the teams or anything like that, just because I think we were kind of asked not to, and I can respect that. But here in Northern Ontario, there was a situation where there was a high school team who played against another high school team in their gymnasium. The one team, the non-local team, had all their starters except for one foul out, I believe, in the first half. That's what I was told. And, it was just a really weird game. And then
and the visiting team had lost twice against this team.
The visiting team beat the home team twice already, quite handedly. And then what ended up happening was after the game, apparently allegedly a parent went over and talked to the coach and said, "Hey, just so you know, the referee has a son who plays on the team." And that kind of just took everyone off a little bit by surprise. And I heard this story, and I can't wrap my head around the fact that people think it's okay for an official to officiate their son's games, right? It's just the perception.
It doesn't matter. There's the sport.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the perception of bias. I don't think officials are biased by any means, but it's the perception of bias. In the Sioux, for example, you look at Jim Corelli, if we look at football, and Rob Grev. Both of their kids played football, right? One at Cora, one at St. Mary's. Jim, to the best of my memory, never ref those games. He always pulled himself out of the games.
Unless something really happened, right?
That's right. And Rob Grev was the same, right? I don't think he ref many Cora games when Peter was playing, right? Because again, it's not that officials are biased.
If anything, they're harder on their own kids.
But it's the perception of how it looks. And so that kind of surprised me that was allowed. And I know the game has been they've appealed it and waiting to hear kind of what's going to happen, if the game's going to be replayed or not. Allegedly, the game's going to be replayed tomorrow, and so we'll kind of see what happens there. But yeah, just what are your thoughts on all that, Jay?
It's the same. I've had two kids, like you say, play sports, so a little bit different situation coaching-wise. But just being a parent, we live in the north, so it does happen in the odd time that number-wise for refs, it's hard. But when it comes to going to a playoff game where that playoff game is determining going to local teams, sometimes you have to. But at that level, I think if they couldn't have provided not that referee, push it to a different date.
That's a good point. You know what? I'm okay with it if it's a regular season game or something like that.
Even
right?
only emergencies if you have
That's
to.
right,
Right?
emergencies. But apparently, the same official reffed the game prior when the two teams played as well, right? So it's one of those tough situations where in a big game, I don't think that should happen, right? I just really don't. I mean, again, perception's everything, and that just looks bad.
And that's exactly it. And they're not all going to the NBA.
Yeah.
But the thing is a chance to go to NASA, chance to go to the Office of Provincials.
Yeah.
So it's something that's an experience for the kids. And not saying that referee, maybe they really did foul out, but the perception of it is the biggest thing of how did he call the game. I know coaching-wise, I was the hardest on my own kids.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. And so I get it. I just, again, referees have to be neutral, and they have to have the perception of being neutral. And what the situation that happened, I think, doesn't cross either of those. So
and I was talking to earlier Bob Davies today, who does the photos, and we were talking about the situation, and he brought up Grevin, he brought up Corelli and stuff like that, and I said, I don't mean it's different, but you have 5 to 6 referees on that field.
Yeah.
When you're doing high school sports, there's usually only 2. And when you have 5 or 6 compared to 2, I even know Goma Thunderbirds the other night, the York Lions were in town for the OUA. And I think there was 4 different times that a referee called the other referee over and they overturned the decision.
Oh, okay.
And that's at the OUA level.
Yeah.
So when you only have 2 referees in a basketball game or a hockey game, I think it could change the outcome.
Yeah, I completely agree. So I just hope that the powers that be realize what happens. I hope that there's a rematch. I really do hope that the game happens tomorrow. And and hopefully next week we can talk a little bit more about it once the game's official and once the situation.
And if that team does win again,
then good for them. Absolutely, yeah. It's well deserved. Yeah. So,
and the other thing is about when it comes to again those teams is being down the line is not just talking basketball. Our youth have to start, I don't want to say stepping up. Aaron Richards, who's going to come on and talk basketball, and for me, he's still a youth, and he's becoming a basketball referee. But we need more younger referees or officials in different sports because, again, that's sometimes why this situation happens, right?
Yeah, and you're right, but you also have to remember that your referees have to let younger people come in. I hear this all the time. Oh, we need more officials. We need more officials. We need more officials. Okay, I know people who have volunteered. I know people who have stepped up and said they want to do it, but they don't get the call, right? So there's the other area of that too, right? Where people, some of the people who are in those positions now need to be ready to kind of move on.
And I use in some of the sports we're doing it's again, they're doing it because there isn't anybody else, but on other spots there is high school basketball in the Sioux. I say the average age, and I'm not sure, is probably mid-30s to mid-40s.
Yeah.
Except for Kemp.
Yeah.
Like you say, he's one of the older ones, but it's something. I go back the other way. I'd never want to put a jersey on, a referee's jersey on.
Oh, I would love to. If I don't coach, that's what I'm going to get into. So, yeah.
And like I say, Aaron will be coming on in a few minutes, but right now we'll just touch base on, other than basketball, like high school hockey. We're hosting here in the Sioux, NASA in March 6th and 7th in Sault Ste. Marie. But last week, Superior Heights defeated Cora in the semifinal. I think that, to me, a lot of people saw that as an upset. They beat them 2-0 in the best-of-3 series. Now they're on to beating St. Mary's Knights.
You mean Superior beat Cora?
Sorry. I was looking at the wrong sheet.
Yeah.
So beat Cora. Hopefully next year we'll see White Pines have a team. But we beat Cora 2-0.
That's awesome. That's huge for Superior.
And there are 1 or 2 goal games.
Yeah, that's amazing for Superior Heights. Good for them. I know, Cora has a pretty outstanding athletic program in their own right, but their hockey and basketball teams this year definitely, didn't. I don't think fulfilled some of the expectations
of
that
what
people had for
used
them,
to
right?
for the brown and gold,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And that's in St. Mary's. Sunday night, I made the second period and half of the third, and it was a 9-1 score.
Yeah.
And not to be against Superior Heights. Superior Heights to me doesn't have the speed to keep up with St. Mary's, and how you're competing against 10 straight city championships.
Yeah.
It's a program that, like you say, it's hard to compete there.
Yeah, it's tough. And then, and again, I do think you're going to start to see that change a little bit over the years.
Not just in hockey, right?
Well, specifically in hockey, but because I do think Cora is getting a lot of these kids now because they just started their hockey program that's fairly new. But I know already that there's a lot of kids going there for this hockey program that they're running. So, the tides are starting to turn a little bit in high school hockey. And I think, over the next couple of years, you're going to see that. And I think you're going to see a little bit more competitive local loop because of it.
And I think if White Pines can ice a team, it also changes the dynamics of the standings too, right?
Oh, absolutely. And White Pines, they used to have a great hockey team every year. Like, they used to be really good in hockey. I mean, they won a couple city championships.
Yep, under Mike Cowan.
Yeah, so, a little surprised. It's unfortunate kind of what's happened there, but they have a great, Baz is there now, and he's a great advocate for athletics, so hopefully he's able to kind of switch the tide a little bit. He's already done it with football.
The figures there who are looking
too,
to coach the team. So it's and the only one thing I do want to do want to mention is something before we get off high school hockey. I don't think I want to be part of the St. Mary's coaching staff. You have one who tries to do a layup and blows out his knee,
I know.
and then you have another one who doesn't know how to skate.
Yeah.
And falls into the boards and breaks his leg. So
who did that?
Chris Miller in practice
No way.
back in January.
Oh, okay.
So I was talking to Frank Medallia the other day.
I know Frank,
and I was talking to I forget the other assistant coach's name, and I said to him, I'm like, "Where's your crutch?"
Yeah.
And I can't repeat what Frank said, but it was more like, "When you gonna let it go?"
Exactly.
I'm like, "When the two you learn how to play basketball and skate." So.
Yeah.
So I think it's going to be NASA. We're streaming NASA hockey, and I think it's going to be a very good mini tournament.
I'm super excited for that. So look forward to it. That's for sure.
And see, next one is again we're going to just touch base on going with Thunderbirds a little bit, and Aaron Richards, who's commentated last week for us for high school, and that's coming on, and he's gonna talk a little bit about Algoma. But first things first, Algoma. The women were up in Lakehead. Like I say, I wrote it down wrong here. They lost by 6 points in overtime. The women would have had their first win this year, so it would have been huge for the Algoma women. And then on Sunday, they played they played York Lions, and they lost 96-51. It wasn't a really exciting game for that. And going on the men's side again, they lost 71-108 in Thunder Bay here in town. 65-78, but the score was close until the last.
Is Thomas Corey still at Lakehead?
No, he's at
Nipissing.
He's in Nipissing.
He's in Nipissing. Sorry, that's right.
Lakehead men's just had a big, women just had a big fiasco up there with their coaching staff too.
What happened?
So, financials.
Okay.
And the way they treated some of the players. So it's unfortunate. And again, I'd just like to give a shout out to the seniors like Algoma who did finish. Carly Fracalanza, 5 years in the OUA. To me, that's a long time to be playing.
For her,
Devin Miron, Peter De La Paz, and Lajuan Okoki, they all graduated. So when I was talking to Devin and Carly after their games, and I said to them, I'm like, so what are you going to do now that you're growing up? And both of them haven't admitted that they're growing up yet.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
and you know what? Congratulations to Carly as she leaves the women's program. She's the new leader in rebounds and three-pointers made. She had 927 points in 89 career games. So congratulations to her. She's the all-time leading points getter in Algoma U history for the females. And Devin will be graduating from the men's program, top 5 in rebounds, steals, and second all-time in assists. So congratulations to those two specifically, and best of luck to all four going forward.
Tony, have you set any records in your sporting career?
records, probably not, but my claim to fame is I scored the first touchdown in SaberCats history. So that's a record.
Is it in their record books?
It should be. It should be very
well,
first.
my last 2 final years of midget hockey, I led the league in penalties. So.
Oh, fair enough.
Yeah,
fair enough.
So,
yeah,
I don't know if it's a record and one I really want to.
Yeah, regardless, it's all good.
To me, at least it's a record of some sort. Because only other records I had were probably spinning on the turntable. So give us just a minute. Aaron's coming in, so Aaron will join us. So good evening, Aaron. How are you?
Hey, Jay, not too bad. How are you?
Good. We're here with Tony also.
Cool. Tony, how's it going, buddy?
Good. How you doing, man?
Not too bad.
Good. Thanks for filling in on the weekend. You did an outstanding job.
Yeah, I had a lot of fun, man. Thanks. No problem.
And like I say, we thought we'd bring you on with Tony not being there and stuff like that. And I think he's still got a smile on his face from Washington, D.C. So he's excited there. And first, we'll touch base. Your thoughts on the overall high school city championships?
Well, I mean, the junior game was phenomenal, right? It's kind of had everything you wanted in a basketball game. Great guards, shooting, bigs, and for the most part, it wasn't super high scoring, but 50 points is still pretty good. I think it kept the fans intrigued, and as opposed to the senior game, which was a little bit of a letdown. But yeah, that junior game was great.
So I know there was a few kids on each team that you knew. In that junior game, who were a couple kids that stood out for you?
Yeah, I've been obviously coaching club for what feels like forever. So I know pretty much all these kids. I don't coach in the loop obviously anymore. So, from the grassroots up, I've known, Nathan Hyam since he was, probably maybe 5, only because I coached his older brother from the time he was in grade 6 until almost the end of high school, right? So some of the kids that stood out, obviously league MVP Nathan Hyam, for Cora, Marquis Strawbridge are kind of their staples, right? Zane Murdoch's a huge piece. He had some key buckets, I thought, kind of in the first half. His driving and the ability to create off the perimeter, off the bounce, and get to the rim really puts a lot of pressure on the defense, but it also allows Cora to stretch the floor because they want to drive and kick, and they really want to they try to shoot the basketball, right? And then obviously the Sioux Sports player of the game that we had was Fernando Corral. He was fun to watch. He really stood out to me. He was like their glue guy, right? High motor, energizer. I referenced Vinny the Microwave Johnson on the broadcast, but I know Fernando started for them, so we couldn't give him that nickname. But he was a little bit of a spark plug. It seemed like every time Cora needed a stop, he got one. Or if there was a 50-50 ball, he was on the floor jumping out of bounds. Even late in the game, he forced a turnover from White Pines, and we hemmed and hawed on the broadcast. We got a chance to see the replay, whether it was a travel or not. He got on the floor, ripped it out of the White Pines' hands, and ended up getting into, I think it was Hyam's or Marquise's hands, and that kind of sealed the game, right? Gave him another opportunity. That's right before Nathan went to the line and shot 2 free throws. But it was kind of, I know I just named 5 of the starters.
Yeah.
Well, it kind of goes in tandem with the way that they play, right? They don't just really use one guy. From the paper, you would think, hey, everything goes through Marquise, but that's not really how they play. And then same thing on the other side with White Pines. Like their guards, I think it was Gareth Pine, Ethan, and Loudit. Huge contributions. Gareth Pine, you could argue that he was the best player on the floor. He put so much pressure on Cora. It seemed like every time Cora tried to make a run, that he was the answer, right? He would get to the rim, and Cora started off, I think it was 5 or 6-0, and then Gareth Pine put his head down, gets to the rim, and settles his team down. So I mean, there's a bunch of players that stood out. It was a great game. It was like a heavyweight fight, right? For a junior game, it was just punch for punch, and it seemed like both teams answered every single time.
And
it was I think.
Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead, Jay.
Just for juniors to play in front of a full crowd too, right?
Yeah, I touched on it to start the game. Getting back to years of past, they got a chance to play in front of big crowds the week before usually city finals, right? So you had the Eric Nysted, I think it was the Norm Nielsen that got rebranded, and then there was the Guy Vitry for both teams. Because when you travel, like, I've coached for forever, and you don't really play in front of big crowds. You get the odd team where you get to a semifinal or a final when you're on the road and it's kind of a hostile environment. But we had a pretty good following at Cora for years, but city finals or championship games is where everybody shows up, right? And everybody shows out. And to not have that over the last weekend, that was probably the biggest crowd that those junior kids have ever played in front of. So we were expecting some nerves, and some of the guys showed it, I thought, early. But for the most part, once you get a minute or two into the game, or you get your first win and your first sweat, you don't even realize you're playing in front of that many people. You're just playing the game that you love and just having fun, right?
Exactly.
So one thing about Fernando Corral that I've noticed this year is, he's really come on and arguably has been the most improved player throughout the season in the junior division. I mean, you're right. We gave him player of the game. I think, Jay, the last regular season game we did too. I feel like, a lot of the energy that Cora gets comes from him, and you kind of touched on that. So I want you to talk about that briefly, and I also wanted to mention about Zane Murdoch. You kind of touched on this too, which I completely agree with. I've said it a few times this season. I feel like Zane, like the offense almost runs through Zane, right? Whatever he decides to do, and whenever he starts to play aggressively, and he's really good, great passer. But whenever he starts to drive and kind of take control of the game, that's when Cora is at their best. Just your thoughts on those 2 points.
Yeah, touching on the first point with respect to Fernando Corral, he's just, I know his dad. Actually, I think Sergio Corral used to work. I used to work at Tenaris years and years ago, and his dad is an IT manager there. So I recognized the last name, and I remember when he was really young. So I kind of put two and two together. He has that sometimes we lack that in the North. We kind of lack that killer instinct. And he naturally has that, whether it came from a soccer upbringing or other sports. He's always in the mix, right? And it's one of the points that I touched on earlier was 50-50 balls. Usually in big games, those are the difference in winning and losing. And it seemed like every 50-50 ball, Fernando was in the mix. And oftentimes he kind of came away with the ball. So to give yourself or your team a chance, second chance, third chance, offensive rebound, right? Or a charge. It seemed like he was always that guy. And you can't teach that, right? So to have somebody like that in your team from Coach Hyam's perspective, it's pretty special. And that goes back to the whole total team effort thing. They don't just play six. I mean, I know they only played 6 or 7, but it seemed like all year they played 10, 11, 12 guys. And they kind of beat you by committee. They don't beat you by one person. Even if Marquise gets the ball in the middle of the floor, they can stretch the floor around the perimeter. And he's very unselfish, right? He'll find shooters. And then to your second point, with respect to Zane
Murdoch.
So Zane Murdoch. So with respect to him, like I thought Nathan Hyam struggled early, and I talked to him post game. The pressure, them White Pines picking him up pressure, maybe a little bit bigger, stronger than Nathan, it really affected him. And Zane is that secondary ball handler. Same with Fernando, right on the wings. That Nathan can kind of get the ball up to in transition, and then Nathan kind of cut to the corner, and that's how they get into their offense. And that also allows, Zane to have the ball in his hands and make decisions. It seemed like even in the semifinal game, he kind of just puts his head down, he gets 1 or 2 dribbles, and once his defender's sideways and not in front of him, he's able to pick his dribble up, and he's just putting his head down and taking 2 steps, whether it's a Euro step or a side step, or even just straight line to the rim. And the help defense, whether it's not there or there, I think in senior, it's going to be a little bit different for him. I think it'll be an adjustment. But right now for junior, he's thriving under that, right? So he releases the pressure, or kind of, relieves the pressure off of Hyam, and his ability to get to the rim is huge. And then obviously he was lights out from the 3 in the second quarter in the semifinal game, and that kind of broke the whole game open. I think he had 9 points or 3 threes, and that was really the difference.
In terms of senior, obviously St. Mary's has been the powerhouse team this year. Undefeated in the regular season loop, if I'm not mistaken. Arguably one of the best senior teams we've seen over the last decade here in this city. In your opinion, what makes St. Mary's as good as they are?
The biggest thing that stood out to me for St. Mary's was Kirby Ocampo. And I know I talked with Coach Nate at the end of the game. I know I touched with Coach Nate at the end of the game, and I know he wasn't a starter for them, but I found that when the ball, and I've only got a chance to watch him once or twice this year, but I found that when he had the ball in his hands, everybody was calm. Everybody was patient. He really controlled the team, and being able to have somebody like that on your team, it sometimes guys get out of sort and they want to do weird things, and because the game is so fast, right? But having somebody like that come in and slow the game down, I think that makes their team that much better. But with respect to your comments with regards to whether they're one of the better teams that have been in the past decade.
Sorry, you're hurting Aaron's feelings now.
I said one of the best teams, and I said arguably. Yeah.
I mean, they're pretty good. I mean, Reese Martin, I thought was phenomenal. Great shooter, great size on the wing. He definitely can play at the next level. But again, it kind of goes back to Cora's junior team. They kind of do it by committee, right? It's not just one guy. Their practices, I feel like they have a bunch of dogs on their team that it's in your face basketball. And then they really walk the line of kind of cockiness and arrogance, right? Sometimes, they play a little too far over the line.
Yeah.
And then sometimes they probably play too far under the line, but they can roll 10, 11, 12 guys. They're going to full court press you. And really the senior loop this year, I didn't think wasn't particularly strong. But with that being said, that's not taking away anything from St. Mary's, because I know that they have bigger aspirations, right? They want to run through NASA, and they want to potentially, get a top 8 seed at OFSA and make an OFSA run. But I mean, they're pretty good. There's been some pretty good teams in the last decade that I think would match up to them pretty well. But they have the pieces, and they have the ability to make a run. They have some size down low, with some wider bodies. But the big thing is they have 3 or 4 guards, and I really think, like, if we follow them through NASA and especially OFSA, if they make a run, I think Kirby Ocampo is going to be the key. I mean, I watch a lot of basketball in my day, and I think if he can not turn the basketball over, be able to beat 2-2-1 presses, because that's what everybody's going to run at OFSA, 2-2-1 back to 2-3. They're going to force you to shoot the ball. And I guess that's, from what I've heard, that's kind of been St. Mary's Achilles heel this year, is they're not a tremendous shooting team. You got to be able to shoot the ball when you get deep, because teams are going to play 2-3. They're going to trap you. You got to be able to drive, kick, skip the basketball, and you got to be able to shoot the 3. So if I had any words of advice, I know you're not going to make shooters in 2 weeks, but they better be shooting the basketball for hours in practice over the next couple of weeks.
So I think with the St. Mary's, I did say one of the better teams. What I think I meant to say is I don't recall a deeper team. Because to your point, these guys are 12 players deep, right? Like, they have 12 guys who would arguably start on any other team in the city. Like, this is the deepest team that I can remember over the last few years. And just kind of your thoughts about the depth.
Yeah, I mean, I commented on it earlier. I think they probably can play 10, 11, 12 guys. And again, getting back to the strength of our league, I think they can get away with that here. Yeah. I think as they get deeper into runs, and maybe even NASA, I'm not sure if the North is particularly strong. I know Llewellyn has a pretty strong team, but talking with some of the players on the St. Mary's Knights, they didn't seem like they were worried, as in years past where, we would go to NASA with our Cora senior teams. LaSalle was a powerhouse. We were a powerhouse, right? Even teams coming out of North Bay, whether it was West Ferris or Scarlett Hall, they gave us some games at times, but really you kind of identified 2, maybe 3 teams that were the best teams in the North. I'm not sure you can say that anybody's on St. Mary's level this year. And it seems like they've done all the right things with respect to some of the tournaments and the travel that they've went on. They've put themselves in position where they've played competitive games, and they want to get back to high tier competition, and that's going to be at OFSA, right?
Yeah.
But the depth over the last 10 years, I mean, I kind of got the short end of the stick in my last 2 years. We had kids that could have came back for fifth years, but they chose to go the work route. Or I had, Brennan Mitchell was a transfer to St. Mary's because he moved, and that's a whole other story. But players like that, like we were loaded. We had 10, 11 guys where we essentially pressed teams and did the same thing Coach Nate's doing right now at St. Mary's. We probably weren't maybe as deep, but to comment on it right now, I don't think it's fair because I haven't really seen them play a truly competitive game, right?
Yeah. So my last question about these guys, and this is kind of an opinion piece, because the one knock that I've heard about St. Mary's is that every game this year, there doesn't seem to be any rhyme or reason for what Coach Kofi is doing in terms of subs and starters. So, everyone has been playing with everyone all season long, and there hasn't really been most people have their starters, and then 5 minutes into the first quarter, you want to make sure you get this guy in and this guy in and have these guys play together. I haven't seen that from St. Mary's at all yet this year. Do you think that can hurt going forward, or do you think that's beneficial that these guys can just play with anyone, but could it hurt that maybe they don't have kind of the chemistry that they could have going forward?
Again, outside of maybe the Cora game, he might have been toying with matchups. He might have been, maybe he thought he had a size advantage against Superior Heights, so he starts two bigs. Maybe against Cora, obviously with Jacob Brown and Ewan, maybe he wanted to put one of those guys on the perimeter and he starts four guards and one big. Maybe against White Pines, he goes five guards for a 5-out set. We haven't really seen them play meaningful games. If I had to guess, he's probably just toying with options, which is a good thing, right? I talked to him about their practices. He doesn't necessarily like some coaches would put their starters versus their bench. I've always been one to let's put your two best players with maybe your weakest players and see if they can truly be the man or learn how to make their teammates better and win a 5-minute scrimmage or a 4-minute scrimmage. And it seems like he's kind of doing the same thing. So that's probably why we've seen so many variations. But just to touch on the player again, Kirby Ocampo, he wasn't a starter for them early. Coach Nate said that
he was off the bench. That's right.
He kind of earned his spot. And when players make plays for you and they're kind of the man for you and they become difference makers, we touched on, with Fernando with 50-50 balls and that kind of stuff. And sorry, that was my little guy.
No, that's okay.
It's, to touch on some of the... Sorry.
No problem.
Sorry, I got the little guy.
Yeah.
My wife just got back from volleyball practice, so my little guy's running around.
It's all good, yeah.
I think what happened was he's learning, who his best players are, and that's kind of the longevity of a season. And he's going to come in with his 5 guys. I can't imagine that he's going to have different lineups for the NASA games this weekend. He's probably going to run with his 5. He's probably finalized his 5, and now you're looking to really fine tune your bench. You're going to say, hey, you were my 11th guy in the regular season. I'm going to make you my 9th guy. When I sub you in, I expect no turnovers. I expect, if you're wide open for a 3 to knock the shot down, right? Because when you get later in your year, it's the details that are really the most important, and your leash becomes really shortened, right? Your role becomes very defined. So I really think it's going to come down to, if guys want to play on their team, they better be doing all the right things to continue to see minutes as the season goes on.
And when it comes to this weekend, we're like Sioux Sports is on Sioux Sports TV streaming the semis and the finals for NASA. But when it comes to, I'm not putting you on the spot, but there's Cora, Schollard, Hall, Llewellyn, St. Mary's, Algonquin, and another team coming from Sudbury. Who do you think we should be watching from what you've seen, like you say, over the years out of those teams in the junior division?
I think it's. I don't want to knock on wood and jinx it. It's probably we're going to see Cora and Llewellyn in the finals. I think they've been on a collision course all year. Not to go off here, but we did this, when I had Matt Clement, Jaden Grisdale, and Zach Zeppa, and Jordan Robinson. And when I had those guys in grade 9, we were on a collision course all year with Llewellyn, right? And we had beat LaSalle, and we had a bunch of grade 9s. We got a chance to see them in a tournament prior. We handed them, probably their biggest loss of the year, and then we played them in a semifinal game, in a quarterfinal or a round robin game, I guess you could say. We beat them by 35 on a Friday night, and then we had to play them the Saturday in the finals, and we ended up losing by 14. And but that's what I'm trying to get at, is that's junior basketball. So Cora played Llewellyn in the Timmins final 2 weekends ago. Marquise was down in Pennsylvania with his with the Made Hoops AAU club team. And so, but they were still able to have a pretty competitive game with Llewellyn, but they had to play back-to-back. They had played White Pines prior to that. So I was talking to Coach Hugh, good friend of mine. I think collectively that they want another crack at Llewellyn. I really hope the bracket works out where they don't have to play each other in kind of a meaningless game. I think you could probably steer it where maybe they play Scholar Hall or the other team, and they kind of have a semifinal where they avoid each other. Obviously, assuming that both teams get wins in the first game.
They are in different brackets. So in Pool A, it's Cora, St. Joe's Scholar Hall, and then a team to be determined tonight out of Sudbury. And then in the B bracket, it's St. Mary's, Llewellyn, and Algonquin. So.
Yeah, okay. So, Cora's going to play Spear Heights.
Cora Juniors will play St. Joe Scholar Hall. Yeah. And a team from Sudbury that's being determined tonight.
Yeah, so I'm not sure who the Sudbury rep is, but I know Llewellyn's going to come out of Sudbury as the number 1 seed, and Cora's coming out of Sioux as the number 1 seed. So Scholar Hall usually has a pretty competitive team. I'm not sure if they'll be able to match Cora's guards and their shooting, but anything can happen, right? So, I'm expecting probably a collision course on those two teams, and I'm going to be there to watch that game for sure. I think it's going to be a good one. I think only because I think Cora's got a little bit of a chip on their shoulder, and sometimes in junior you need that, because when you win all year, like if they would have went in and beat Llewellyn on the weekend in Timmins, I'm not so sure Llewellyn doesn't come in with the chip on their shoulder and upset Cora in the finals, right?
Exactly.
So, you know what? I wish 7-8 years ago when I had my guys that happened and I didn't have to play them the night before. But
no, it's true. Yeah.
But anything can happen, man. Kids take naps, or kids don't eat right on the Saturday. Just weird people do weird things, man. So you never know. You can't predict the junior loop. You can't.
So before we let you go, because we've had you on here quite a bit, you've given us a ton of time. We really appreciate this. This has been awesome. But before we do let you go, I want to ask you, I have 2 last questions for you. The first, obviously, the Senior League MVP this year was Reese Martin. Reese is an outstanding young man, comes from an outstanding family. His mom, Trina, has just been, she's wonderful and always been supportive of, even through Sioux Minor football and things like that. And Reese has always been a great contributor to the league as well. I know this is basketball, and you've had a lot of experience with Reese. But just talk about Reese as a person and as a basketball player, and kind of what led him, in your opinion, to winning the MVP award this year for the senior division.
So last year, a really good friend of mine, Jeff Giovanatti, ran Great Lakes Academy, which is a prep school in town. He had some out-of-town kids. He had some local kids, and Reese played on that team last year. So that obviously gave him a ton of confidence, right, playing against some of the best players in arguably Canada. So he comes in, as a 5th year at St. Mary's, and he's blowing away the competition, right? I looked at him when we watched him in the finals. His skill set and even just his body, sometimes like 5th years just have a different kind of a body, a different demeanor about them. They're very intentional in what they're trying to do with the basketball, whereas maybe some grade 10s or 11s that are playing in senior loop are just driving just to drive or just shooting just to drive. I felt that everything Reese did on the court was purposeful, whether he was getting his teammates involved, whether he was shooting a 30-foot 3-point shot, because he knocked down a couple of them, right? He showed his range. He's able to get to the rim. He's able to make his teammates better. And he probably could have went for 30 or 40 himself if he really wanted to, but that's not the type of person he is. I don't know him like personally on a very personal level, but I did get a chance to speak with him after the game. Seemed like a very well-rounded kid. His mom came over and she was very excited, about the interview, and she was filming and she was having a blast with it too. And she, he seems like a very good kid. Even talking with Kirby, it seemed like both those kids were very down to earth, very respectful, and humble, right? Humble as a champion, which is all, and his work ethic obviously shows because of their skill set, but those are the makeups of what make champions, right? So it's no excuse why they're champions. And to be fair, I wouldn't be surprised to see them NASA champions on the weekend. And when you get to offset, anything can happen, right? If he decides to put his head down and become the man, which, if I'm saying Mary's, I'm saying, okay, I know we played 12 guys, but you're going to need some clutch scoring from certain people and you want specific shots. The ball's going to get run through him. Yeah. Right. So I'm excited to see what happens in the next couple of weeks with those guys.
And finally, the junior MVP obviously went to a young man whose family is extremely well known in the basketball world here in the Sioux. I actually coached his older brother in hockey. So I've known Nathan since he was just little as well. What an outstanding young man he is. Very polite, good work, excellent work ethic. Kind of led his team all year, and well-deserved, league MVP award for him. And just kind of talk a little bit about him. And I know you said you're good buddies with Hugh as well. So just talk about what Nathan, has brought to the team this season and why he was the MVP of the league in your opinion.
I mean, the Sioux's so small, right? So everybody kind of gets to see these kids in different sports, right? Obviously, I'm a basketball guy, but you with hockey or football, all these kids are playing football when they're younger. So it's kind of funny how everything comes full circle, and we all experience different times of their lives, right? But we all share in their success. And the Hyams are phenomenal. I mean, Ronnie and Hugh have been great ever since I had Lucas with Slam when he was in grade 6. Even, on some of the Ontario teams that I had coached and rep the North, he was a big part of it. And then his brother, I always say the younger siblings are always the better siblings because they live in the gym or they live in the rink and, they're running around up and down. They're watching you don't think they're paying attention, but they're in the gym and they hear the fans and they see the bits and pieces of the game. So, what Nathan's doing is not surprising me at all. I've had a chance to coach him in club with a couple different teams and, help out in some sort of capacity, whether it's running practices or traveling with them. Or Nathan was just around when I was coaching Lucas. Great kid. He's always been a little scrappy kid, just like his brother. He's a fierce competitor. And obviously he's grown in the last couple of years. I think that's really helped him. As Lucas wasn't really the tallest, so Lucas gaining some size allowed him to play a little bit more physical. Handling the basketball, relieving pressure. I find that this year he's learning how to become a leader, and I think he's thrived in that role. Because let's call a spade a spade. We probably didn't think that Nathan Hyam was going to be nominated for league MVP from Cora. I think everybody thought that it was probably going to be Marquise Strawbridge. But I had really good conversation. you guys can argue that, but I've had really good conversations with Coach Hugh, and it's the kind of the stuff he's doing off the court. I know Marquise travels a lot, but the practice is a big one. Leading his team, by example, whether it's in school or whether it's getting the balls before and after practice. And that's not a knock and saying that Marquise isn't doing that. I just think Nathan overall, collectively, as a total person, I think was the leader of that team and well-deserved league MVP for him. But phenomenal kid, similar attributes as Reese, we kind of touched on earlier. He's got a good head on his shoulders, got good grades, good parents, really backing him, holding him accountable. I can remember in the fall having conversations with Hugh about, like, they're trying to train for basketball and he's doing boys volleyball, but he's doing He's doing football as well, and it's just too much, right?
Yeah.
So his parents were able to help guide him and make a decision that was best for him. It's very hard to manage 3 active sports, right? Like it's almost impossible. You're not giving everybody your all, right? So you're kind of shortchanging different teams, and it really wears on your body, especially in basketball. Basketball is such a long season, from like October, November until really March, 6 months, and it's a grind. So half the time it's just, if you could just stay healthy in the long run, that's really it's a war of attrition, a battle of attrition. Those are the teams that are the most successful. But Nathan Hyam, great kid. That Cora junior team, that Cora team has the foundation to be good for the next few years. Even with the grade 9 class coming in, you could argue bringing up some of those kids. It's going to be really intriguing to see what happens there in the next couple of years.
And the last question before we let you go, you as a coach, would you put Marquise up to senior next year? Or would you hold him and keep him as a grade 10 junior?
I mean, I've had this conversation with a lot of different people. I'll give you my honest opinion, Jay and Tony. It really depends on, because I think he's going to stay in town next year. I'm not sure yet. It really depends on who's coaching him. And the argument behind that is you want to make sure that he's being challenged, because if he goes down and plays in these AAU events, whether he's playing on, for Canada Elite, or you play in the summertime on a high-level AAU circuit, as well as this Made Hoops throughout this season, you want to make sure that he's continuing to be challenged and not just, being thrown out there and being allowed to do whatever the heck he wants. He needs to be held accountable on and off the court, whether that's his grades, whether that's, what he's doing in his extracurriculars, and then also, helping him put the work in, whether it's shooting, whether it's working on specific skills. Like, I would expect you to sit down with him, or somebody to sit down with him at the end of the season and have some of his game film and say, these are some of his weaknesses and these are some of your strengths, and provide him a path of what's going to happen in the next 6 months in your off season, and how can we help you get there, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
But I mean, staying in junior, that doesn't mean you can't play in senior tournaments. I know the grade 9s, like, the thing with that team is they were like a 7-8 group last year, and then the 8s went up as 9s, and now the 8s are just hanging there waiting. So they want to play with I know a lot of guys want to play with their boys, right? And then that goes for all the teams in the loop. I know we're just touching on Cora, but that's with everybody. There's kids that want to play, with their boys at St. Mary's, and same thing at Spear Heights. But I don't know. I think it really comes down to coaching and what the end goal is for Marquise. Does he want to play Division I basketball? Is that his goal? I sat down with Anthony Iacco, Jonah Fogg, Anthony and Sammy Ivy. I sat down with Matt Clement. I sat down with Jaden Grisdale. Even Jordan Robinson, right? I know he's a football guy, but he had options, right? Like, you have to sit down with these kids, and I know it's only grade 10. I know they're 15, but that's a huge year. So I know you don't, because they're trying to decide their life for school too, right?
Yeah.
Guidance counselors and teachers are all over them and saying, what do you want to do with your life? Oh, I want to be a doctor. I want to be a physiotherapist. It goes the same thing with sports. If you have aspirations to play at the next level, then you have to be putting the work in, but you also have to surround yourself with the people that are going to help make you successful, and maybe not just a yes man, or maybe not just somebody who's going to roll the basketball out and just let you play. And I'm not saying that that's not, whether the coach at Cora or coach is at Cora, because I have great relationships with Coach Aiden. I have great relationships with Coach Hugh, right? That's really what it comes down to is what do they want? What does he want? We can speculate forever, but at the end of the day, we're not Marquise Strawbridge. He's going to make the decisions, and he's going to surround himself with people that are going to help make the best decision for him and his family.
Well, Aaron, I can't thank you enough, and we're finalizing what's happening on Saturday, so we'll talk to you over the weekend for sure.
Absolutely, guys. Anytime.
Yep.
I love talking basketball. I know I kind of talked your ear off, but very passionate about it, so I appreciate you guys having me on. Thanks.
No, you're great, man. Really appreciate everything you do for the city, and keep up the great work. We're lucky to have you here, man. So thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
boys.
you.
Hopefully I'll see you this weekend.
Absolutely.
And just to touch base, done basketball. Just Sioux Greyhounds, you were out of town. this past week, they 3 straight losses again going into the playoffs. Your thoughts on what's happening?
I can talk about the Greyhounds forever. So, before everyone says doom or gloom, the season's over,
Fire Dean,
all the BS that we're hearing. Let's look at who they played to end the season. They have 14 games left. They play Niagara, who's 10th in the East. They play Guelph, who's 6th. Kitchener, who's 8th. They got 2 against Sarnia. Sarnia obviously is a pretty good team. They're 3rd in the West. You got Oshawa. You play Sudbury 3 times. You play Saginaw twice. And then you got Windsor once, who will probably, or twice, sorry, but they've already clinched the playoff spot, so who knows who they're going to play.
Who's going to probably might be the top team in the whole league.
That's right. The Greyhounds have already played they've had a tough month, man. Oh my goodness, have they had a tough month. But these teams are playing. There's no reason that they can't, think to themselves, hey, listen, if we win 9 out of these last 14 games, we have a pretty good shot at the playoffs, right? And, 9, 10 wins, is it a bit of a stretch for how they've been playing? Sure. Is it doable? Absolutely, it's doable, right? They're finally starting to get a little bit healthy. Schenkel's been playing well. Again, I don't think it's all doom or gloom for this team right now. I think that they have a shot. They just have to answer the bell.
Now, with Schenkel back, is something you had Ivanov for 25 straight games. Where do you insert him in these last 14? Do you, or you just rely on Schenkel?
No, I think you're relying on Charlie at this point. I think, Ivanov, he'll probably get in. I think, they must have a couple 3-3s, so Ivanov will play. Out of the last 14 games, I wouldn't be surprised if Sammy played in 2 of them.
And they're in Niagara, Guelph, and Kitchener this weekend. So.
Yeah, exactly. So
but again, that's 3 big games that they might have a chance to.
Yeah, they need it.
So it's again, but going back to Ivanov next year, when we keep on going about Memorial Cup bid, would you keep Ivanov as an overage?
So I love Ivanov. I've loved him since he came to the team. I love his work ethic. He works his butt off. Does he struggle? Does he have bad games? Absolutely, he has some bad games. Does he have some outstanding games? Absolutely, he does. My thing is you cannot judge the goaltenders based on this season. I really don't think you can. I feel like this is a young team who's had numerous defensive miscues, in their own zone, and their goalies have been hung out to dry a lot this season. So
mostly, you were out of town, but on Friday, 10-2.
Yeah.
That's hanging your goalie out.
100%, right? So again, I do feel like it's tough to judge the goaltending based on how this season went. Now, we talked about it before. Grahams have a heck of a decision to make going forward. You got Miller, who was a second or third round pick this year.
In the pipeline.
Yeah, and the Hounds are extremely high on him. They have Schenkel, who's been outstanding for them this year. Plus, you have Ivanov, right? So what do you do? It's going to be interesting, and the Greyhounds definitely have some decisions to make, because do you want to go into a potential Memorial Cup year with 2 young goalies, with an 18-year-old goalie and a 17-year-old goalie? That's tough, right? So, yeah.
And the other question I have, and talking about defense a little bit, is Brody McConnell-Barker, like Bryce's younger brother. Now, would you have a chip on your shoulder a little bit? Like you say, with injuries and everything, they brought Spencer Evans in on the back end there, and send Brody McConnell-Barker down to the junior A's, to Thunderbirds and the NOJHL. So, would you have a chip on your shoulder because of that?
So, great question. So, I don't know what to make of Brody yet. I really don't, right? You look at his draft year, okay? When he was in his draft year, I always talk to and joke about this with people around the Greyhounds, but he was drafted as a forward. But in his draft year, he played defense. So why did he play? Why would you play?
Just to get drafted?
But why would you play defense if you're going as a forward? Was he not good enough to crack the top 9 forwards on his midget, or on your team, on your draft year? Again, people are like, he's a team player. He wanted to play D, all this kind of stuff. Good for him. But again, if you're going into the OHL draft and you're drafted as a forward, why would you play defense the year prior, right? It doesn't make a lot
It
of sense.
happens rarely, injuries or stuff.
That's right.
Somebody who could go back, but
That's
just.
right. So again, I don't know if, and again, I don't know if he wasn't good enough to crack the top 9 forwards, which is why he played D. But that's kind of how it looked, right, going into the season. And the fact that he's still playing D shows what a good athlete he is, because he can obviously play both sides of it. So again, if you're Brody, would you be really upset? I don't think he should be upset, because technically this is only his second year playing defense, right?
Yep.
So I'm looking at it as a positive, because it's almost like he needs to just kind of learn the position a little bit more. He's only 17. He's young. Let him learn. I'd rather him learn with the Thunderbirds than have him learn with the Greyhounds, right? Because he did have a little small sample size, and he had some great games, but he struggled a little bit too.
But again, going back there, the games that he did end up playing, he had the swing of Sarnia and Windsor too.
Yeah,
so
exactly. Tough competition.
Yeah, he got ice time though,
Yeah.
so it shows that maybe
the one thing I love about Brody's game, because I watched him quite closely, is he is not afraid, right? I love the fact that he stuck his nose in there, that he didn't seem...
I compare him to Justin Kluche.
Yeah, he didn't seem out of place, which was nice. So, again, it's a great point, right? You're calling up Spencer Evans, giving him a shot. You got to wonder what Brody thinks of that. But, if he's anything like his brother, I think he's going to take this adversity and work extra hard and come back in the next year and show the Greyhounds what they have in
prove
him.
us wrong.
And yeah, I don't know Brody. I don't know him at all. I haven't really talked to him much, but I do enjoy the way he plays. I love watching him play hockey.
And I get to see him on the Thunderbirds, and he'll rush the puck, but if he's covered, he stays in battles in the corners in the offensive end. So
yeah, I'm excited to see what he does. I think he needs to get a little bit bigger, maybe get a little bit stronger, but yeah, he could be a huge asset for this Greyhound team going forward. And honestly, I'd like to see him maybe move up to forward again, right? Like if that's where he's, if that's what he likes to do, because I agree with you, the way he kind of plays, he kind of looks like that grinding type.
I go Kluche wise, where exactly. The size, they're not big boys, but they're willing to get in the corners and muck it up.
Yeah, and all this talk. I mean, you mentioned it earlier. Fire Dean, fire Raft,
and there's chance. I was told there was chance. Over the weekend,
and they got. I heard that the Hounds got booed off the ice and all that stuff. Listen, I'm certainly not trying to be a homer, because I've been highly critical of the Greyhounds in certain aspects too. But you can't fire Dean based on this season. I don't think that that's a good call at all. I think Dean's a good coach. He's proven himself to be a good coach. Again, we've been spoiled here the last decade, man. Like, we've had really good teams for the last 10 years.
I go the other way, and I'm being devil's advocate here, and I'm not trying to put it on Dean. Yeah. If you still saw Jordan Smith as an assistant, would that be a little bit more pressure of maybe him?
I mean, we interviewed Kyle Barber last week, right? And Barber said a lot of nice things about both assistant coaches, right? And I trust Kyle's opinion. Again, I feel like those two assistants who have come in this year,
they're thrown into the fire, right?
Well, not only that, but they've come into a no-win situation, right? You got Jordan Smith, a beloved Sioux kid, outstanding hockey player, great coach, and you got two coaches who left the Greyhounds to go to the AHL, and now you're two non-locals who no one knows who you are, and you're coming here to try and make a name for yourself. It's a tough role, right? It's a tough position to be put in. So, again, I don't know if, I think we all just kind of need to let's keep in mind that, this is the same fan base who was calling for Kyle Dubas to get fired after the Jack Campbell trade. I wrote a letter to the editor after that saying, give this kid a chance. Like, I'm sure he'll learn his lesson, but, and
Ryan O'Reilly in Toronto right now.
And now look what Dubas has done, right? So, like,
and they were at the start of the season, they're ready to fire him and Keith, right?
That's right. So, again, before everyone wants to, get rid of Dean, let's kind of take a step back and see how far we've come as an organization.
We're just used to winning, right?
Yeah, and you know what? It's a down year. It happens, right? It happens. I think the Hounds will be better for it going forward.
And the last thing, again, we're just going to touch base is the NLJHL with the Sioux Thunderbirds. They won in Sudbury 6-2, and then Cochrane Crunch was here in town, and they won 15-1.
Yeah.
One thing is, and I've said it all along, and like I say, Commissioner Mazuka might not like it, but there's 12 teams in Northern Ontario. A little bit watered down. Would you go down to 10?
Okay, it's funny you mentioned that. And the reason I say that is because I do the, again, I work for Canadian Mental Health. I do the Safe Talk suicide prevention for the NOJHL, right? When I went down the roster, I thought there was only 8 teams. That's what I remembered, right? And that's how kind of far away I've been. And then I was looking, and I couldn't believe how many teams there were. To your point, right?
You have French River that's in Noelville. That's probably I shouldn't say it, but almost compare it. Not even Wawa, is in between Hayden and Wawa when it comes to size.
Yeah, again, it's hard to get kids to come up here, right, all the time, and yeah, watered down. I don't know if it's been watered down because there's a lot of really good hockey players in the area, but. Yeah, if you're going to compete, you got to get kids from out of town. You got to go to the States. You have to go find these diamonds in the rough, right? I know Elliott Lake, has a kid from Cleveland.
Yeah, NLJHL, they're allowed, don't call me on it, 6 or 8 Americans.
Yeah.
So that's 1/3 of your roster.
That's right.
When people say, oh, we can't get kids to come, sometimes I think, and not to be, it's sometimes the program. Something has to change, right?
That's right. So
Kyle Brick in Blaine River, Jason Rapowitz and Espanola, the kids are loving it there. Yeah. So it's not always.
You bring up a really good point about the watered down, and again, I don't know if it's necessarily watered down, but could the league be a little bit more competitive if it got a little smaller? Absolutely. And what would a competitive league do? Drop profits, drop interest.
Draw more interest in players.
That's right. Yeah.
And to me, also recruiting too, right?
100%. So
where they say there's not overly big numbers out of the NLJHL, but when you have 12 teams,
yeah,
you get 1 or 2 from a team. Yeah, that's 12 kids. But you go down to 10, and you might go up to 18 to 20
That's
kids.
Right.
So
yeah, and you also have to think sustainability, right? I don't think you're going to be able to sustain a 12-team league. I just think that's too many.
To send a player to Noelville or even Elliott Lake, and it's nothing against people running the programs are doing a great job.
Yeah.
The thing is, though, as a teenager from the age of 16 to 20, it's changed over time. Because when I played or you played, if I didn't make the Sioux Thunderbirds, I went and played in Elliott Lake or I went and played in French River. Now these kids are saying, I'm not going to play there.
I know.
And I think that's the biggest problem.
And not only that, you have to think about the fact that how many times has Elliott Lake kind of sold, right? Yeah. They were the Ice, they were the Vikings, they were the Bobcats. That's not sustainable, right? Yeah. You're losing the fan base. Yeah. You're losing
the fan base is there, but when it keeps on happening, the fan base is going to say, hey, we're not going to support.
Yeah, exactly. So, different owners and things like that. So, yeah, I just think they kind of need to take a look at that for sure.
Going to other places, there's not too many other places in Northern Ontario you can put a team in anyways.
That's right. Yeah, no, not even Wawa.
Exactly. I've heard that. I've heard somebody say that they like to have their team in Wawa.
Well, they used to have a teams.
A few years, it was like a senior team. Or,
I don't know what it was.
But now going back, Wawa with the type of money that's up there now, and River Wawa might be the place to have a team.
No question.
Well, Tony, I can't thank you enough. And next week we're going to have a lot to talk about when it comes to NASA volleyball, NASA basketball, and the Greyhounds.
Super excited, man. Love doing this with you. Thanks again, and again, congratulations to both league MVPs in the junior division and senior division for basketball. And best of luck to all local high school teams this weekend in the playoffs.
And again, follow SiouxSports.com for all your up-to-dates. We're the voice for sports in the North.